Welcome back to the Christianity and Business Podcast, an initiative of the Archie W. Dunham College of Business at Houston Baptist University. I'm your host, Darren Shear, and this is the show that helps Christian business leaders to integrate biblical values into business. You can get more information about HBU's Center for Christianity and Business and sign up to receive free access to all 5 issues of the Christian Business Review Journal by visiting our website at christianityandbusiness.com. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of teaching biblical business principles to your kids. And we're joined by PJ Jonas. And really, there is no one better that I know of to talk about this than PJ. In 2008, PJ began a goat milk soap business with her husband and 8 kids. And that business now distributes soap all over the world. It's been featured on the Today Show and in Oprah Magazine and all kinds of other media outlets. If you just do a Google search, you'll see how PJ's been just spreading this message. But it's not just about the product itself, but it's the way that she's going about this business and bringing her family into it. And the way that she is running this business is literally impacting multiple generations, as well as a product that is changing lives. Welcome to the Christianity and Business Podcast, PJ.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, tell us about this fascinating company, Goat Milk Stuff, and how it got started.
It really was totally a God thing. I had wanted to get dairy goats because I wanted the healthy raw milk for the children to drink. And it's illegal to buy raw milk to drink in Indiana. And so I figured, okay, I got to be honest about this. So I'm going to get my own goats so we can have our healthy milk. And we were just, enjoying that. We were enjoying homesteading. We were enjoying our homeschooling and having the children learn and all of that. And one day I had all the kids in the bathtub and I was just letting them splash around, and I picked up the baby wash that I had always used and was just so appalled at the ingredients in it. I had never really looked at them before, and they were all chemical based and petroleum based. And I was like, that's it. I am going to learn to make my own soap. So I did some research and found out when you make soap, you need to use a liquid. And I was like, oh, well, I've got, all this goat milk that's really good for you. And so maybe I'll just put the goat milk in instead of water. And when I made the soap and put it in the shower, my husband's finger stopped cracking and splitting. And wow. that was kind of like, wow, this is something that we had, tried for years, all sorts of different stuff to get, to fix his fingertips, and nothing ever really worked. And I was like, okay, well, this is great. And so I really just kind of did it for ourselves and the family. I'd give it away as gifts and that kind of thing. And the whole time I was making soap for the family, I was actually praying for a family business. And never, it wasn't the right time. And so I never, God never had me put the soap and the business together. And then what actually happened was we went to visit my parents. And we drove a big, it's called a Sprinter. It's a big diesel vehicle. And we stopped and got gas, and we went to the diesel pump, put the diesel in. And long story short, there was actually gasoline in the diesel pump. And it destroyed the vehicle engine. No. But it was one of those things where it wasn't a quick thing. It took them 6 months to fix it, because they would say, okay, well, we got to fix this. And then they fix that. And then they'd have to fix the next thing. So it took 6 months. And when the whole thing was done, it was a $9,000 bill. And we did not have $9,000. We were, single income, just my husband was working. And I was like, okay, Lord, well, what are we going to do? And I had just bought ingredients to make about a year's worth of soap for the family. And I was like, okay, well, I've got all this stuff to make soap. Maybe I'll just try and sell a few bars, maybe raise some money for groceries or something. I mean, never envisioned that it would become what it has. And we started selling the soap. And what happened was, we would give out samples. Everybody we met, everybody we came in contact with got a sample. And I started getting these calls from people who had eczema. And I'd never dealt with eczema before. I didn't realize what an issue it was. And people were telling me that the soap fixed their eczema and their children's eczema. And God just took that whole incident and by word of mouth just started this company, and we named it Goat Milk Stuff because that was what we wanted to do, was just make stuff with goat milk. And he just really took it and grew it just beyond anything I could ever imagine. So that was kind of how it got started.
Wow, I love that. I mean, I was just thinking about how people will go to the Dead Sea to just sit in that salt to deal with their skin issues. And here you are able to discover this goat milk and the healing properties in it. And that resulted in, you saw how it worked for your husband and realize, you know what, there's a business here. There's not just, but it didn't start with, let me just start a business, but here's a need that people have, and here's a way to solve that need. So did you have all 8 kids at this point?
Yeah. So when I first started making soap for the family, I didn't. I only had, I was pregnant with number 7. And so it was after the last one was born. And that was when God was like, okay, now it's time. Now, you have a little more free time, not a lot of free time, but you have a little bit more, and it's time to start goat milk stuff. And, you can put a little more attention into that. So it was, Jade, who's the youngest, was probably about 9 months old when we started goat milk stuff.
So it certainly wasn't out of boredom because we have 2 kids, and I know what my wife goes through with 2 kids, and I can only imagine with 8 kids. And I was really struck by when you said that you were praying that the Lord would show you how to start a family business. Was it the heart of it?
Yeah, there were 2 reasons why I was praying for that. Number one, I really felt that my husband was away from home too much. I really wanted him more involved, and he was very active. My husband was trained as a teacher. He taught for 7 years, and then when we moved to Indiana, he actually got a job as a garbage man, which was wonderful because it was only 4 days a week, and there was no, he didn't have to create papers, he didn't have to worry about all of that other stuff that comes along with teaching. And so he really had more time to focus on the family. And it became as he left teaching and started focusing more on the family, I felt like we needed even more of that. We needed him there for the day-to-day lessons that, he has such wisdom that he could impart for the children. And, all of them obviously, but we have 5 boys. And I was like, they need their dad more. All this stuff that, I can sort of do, but he just does so much better. So that was the first part reason I started praying. And then the second one was because we homeschooled, I really wanted their education to be practical. I didn't want, I was less interested in them, being able to repeat facts back to me, and more interested in them having the work ethic and the problem solving and the communication and the real world expertise that I just felt that starting a business was one of the best ways that, that I could provide them with that kind of an education.
So what does a typical school day look like? And I know that it varies depending on the ages, because I think the oldest is 19 now?
Yeah, she just turned 20.
Just turned 20. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so I guess kind of during that kind of primary, middle school education, what would a typical day look like, and how did the business get rolled into that? Okay,
so we don't separate anything. Everything we do is integrated, whether it's, family time, business time, school time, God time, it's all rolled into one. And I don't really have things that, I feel like I need to cover with them. I really let God kind of bring to the forefront what it is that, he thinks that they need to be learning. And so a lot of it gets combined into the business. So for example, some of the younger ones are learning cursive right now. So when the invoices come in, when people place an order on the website, then we print the invoices and the children all sign the invoices. And so they start by just their print and their huge straight stick letters, and now they're all learning cursive. So instead of having a penmanship book, they practice and they write notes to the customers on the invoices. So that's how they cover a lot of their writing.
Oh my God, that just blew my mind.
Yeah. Things like their math. Math is just completely covered with the financials of the business. They've been involved from the beginning with every single financial decision the business makes. Now, they obviously, as a 2-year-old, they don't get it. They vote, but they just, raise their hands as their siblings are raising their hand kind of thing. But as they're getting older, they learn Excel. They love Excel. My kids create games and stuff on Excel. And so they have their own salaries. They pay their own taxes. They have to pay the accountant to do their taxes. If we're going to, go on a vacation, they have to decide, are we going to drive? Do you want to pay for a flight? Because they are the ones that pay for all of those things. So they're learning all the budgeting. All of that stuff tends to kind of come practically, just through that. When we're trying to make a decision about, okay, let's, for all the employees and for us, what kind of raises are we going to give? We'll go through all the percentages percentages, and we'll go through all the business taxes and, okay, if someone gets a 25-cent raise, here's what it actually looks like down the line by the time you add in payroll taxes and workers' compensation insurance, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it just comes out with, how'd you do that, Mom? I don't know how you got that. Okay, well, let's go over percentages a little bit more because it seems like you're having, a little bit of trouble with that.
PJ, I had this nagging thought throughout pretty much my entire elementary school, middle school, high school education, particularly in the area of math. And I would keep thinking, how am I actually going to use this skill set, this theorem, this whatever it was that we were learning, because it seems so removed, so distant from anything that I was currently operating with in my day-to-day life. And so there was just no connection. And at one point, and I tended to be kind of a rascally kid, but I just at one point asked one of my teachers in front of the whole class, how are we actually going to use this at some point? And I never got a straight answer to that question, but and I'm just thinking about if at that same age I was working in your operation and you were my teacher and I asked you that question, you would have immediately been able to bring me to something very specific that needed to get done that day, and in order to teach that principle. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, I tell people that my children cover a lot less ground than they would in a public school system, but they retain everything that we learn because they're using it. That's how they do it. My kids are masters at fractions because of all the cooking that we do and all the gardening. And it was really funny when they were, little. We have chickens, and I found them all counting instead of being, base 10 where they would count 10, 20, 30. They would count in base 12s, 12, 24, 36. And I finally realized it was because they were collecting eggs, and it was the egg carton had a dozen, and that was why they were counting in 12s instead of in 10s. So all of those things, and they just laugh about it now, but it really is, you have to keep your eyes open to what it is, where the opportunities are. It's a lot easier in many ways. Be like, okay, yeah, here's a workbook. Just, let's plot along through the workbook. You don't have to really pay that much attention. You just have to answer their questions. It takes a lot more to be looking to be like, okay, I think there's a weakness there. We need to concentrate on that a little bit, or especially when there's 8 of them, where some of them will be, do all the answering of the questions, and some of the others are a little quieter, and you have to be like, okay, you guys be quiet. We're going to, let these guys, tell us what they think we should do in this situation. So,
right. Well, I know with our kind of American Common Core standardized testing mindset, there's people thinking, well, what about like the SAT, for example, when they have to take like college entrance exams, things like that. What, in terms of the way that they're being prepared, is that something that you feel like they're really well prepared for?
Yeah, so I actually tutored math for about 15 years. I was an engineer by education. And what I found was that so many students couldn't do the work when it was out of context. If they knew what section they were in their workbook, their math book, they could do it. But the minute you pulled everything out of context, they were really confused. And so I decided early on that I was going to not tell them whether we were adding, dividing, multiplying, subtracting, make them figure out which one we were doing. And what I found over the years, and as the older children are now older, is when you teach the children to problem solve and to think, and you don't I don't ever give my children any answers. They have to all come up with it all by themselves. They are then able to study for whatever they want to study, so if it's something they're like, okay, now it's, you want to go to college, you want to take the SAT exam, let's go. And you sit down and you get a book and you go over it, and they can learn it so much faster because they know how to think. They have that critical eye and that problem solving that is really hard to teach in a big classroom with 30 kids. That's really hard for teachers to do that and pull that off for so many.
Yeah. And I mean, really out of necessity, the emphasis in those big classrooms is on learning versus thinking, because the thinking is really, you have to empower the students. Whereas in learning, you could just focus on cramming things down into their mind and hope they somehow catch it, which, the enormous disparity between students that go through those classes and most of them not getting it, some of them really getting it, is just massive. But if they could actually experience and learn how to critically think, that really is what is going to set them up for success in the future.
Yeah. And I tell people, so I'm in a unique position because I have 8 children, so I can see just how diverse all of them are. And my children are all very intelligent, but they're all very intelligent in different ways. And I have one child who didn't learn to read until he was 10 years old. And my mom was all freaking out, oh my gosh, he's never going to read. I'm like, no, he'll be fine. He'll get it. And at 10 o'clock, when he was 10 years old, it clicked. And he is now one of my more voracious readers. He reads everything. And,
Wow.
I would tell my mom, because she was actually a public school teacher, if he had been in the public school system, he would have been labeled as, learning disabled. He would have had a lot of problems with that. And what we do is when the children turn 16, we have them take classes at our local community college. So he just took his first class there. He just finished a couple weeks ago, and he did amazing. He did really, really well. And it was, I do it for a couple of reasons, not so much that they'll get a degree or whatever, but so that they have that experience and they have that confidence that if they ever, want to go back and become a veterinarian or whatever, they cannot be intimidated because they're not sure what the classroom setting is going to be like. So that's worked really well for the older 3.
Wonderful. Well, when I started to envision your workplace and your kids, milking the goats and fulfilling orders and so forth, I was thinking about Jesus and the way that so much of his teaching was done with his disciples out in a workplace context, whether it was out fishing on a boat. I mean, how many lessons did he teach while they were in the boat working together and fishing? In what ways would you say the workplace has provided a context for discipleship opportunities for your kids that may not otherwise have been available? And what are some of those principles that you teach through the business?
When I started homeschooling, one of the things that I did was I sat down with a piece of paper and I physically wrote down the things that I wanted, in my children for me to consider homeschooling a success. And it was interesting as I wrote this whole list down, none of them were academic based. They were all character based. They were all based on how they treated other people. Those were the things that were important. The math skills, the reading, the writing, those, I obviously want them to have, and they have all of those, but that's not the most important thing. So what we found is when we're working side by side with them, or they're working side by side with their siblings, or they're working side by side with the employees, a lot of their character issues that they need individual help with really comes out. So, for some, it may be diligence, where they'll want to quit after just a couple, and you really have to help them be diligent. For the others, it'll be self-control. And so, we do a lot of different things in the soap room. We'll do things like, I don't know if you're familiar with, J. Vernon McGee's got a Bible, a radio ministry called Through the Bible, where he covers the entire Bible in 5 years. And so we'll listen to that while we're bagging soap, and everybody will be there, and we'll just listen to it, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. And we'll have scripture that we'll say, and it's really easy because what I found is when you're just sitting at the table and you're talking, you can have a lot of really good conversations about God and the Bible, and Jesus. But when you're working and their struggles are evident because you see them happening and it's affecting their peers and their coworkers and their siblings, you can then take those Bible verses and be like, okay, this is how this applies. And again, you take it out of the theoretical and you put it in the day-to-day living. And that's, I think it just makes it more clear for them what Jesus was talking about when he said something, when he said, esteem others more highly than yourselves. Okay. See how you just, you've got that stack of orders there, and there was a really difficult one to pull on top, and you left it on top and dug out an easy one on the bottom, and you left that hard one for others. Is that esteeming your coworker more highly than yourself? No, it's not. That wasn't doing that. And so you have to know your Bible, which we should anyway, but there's some really good verses there that you can pull out, and they're just kids, they'll just look at you like, okay, you're right, I'm wrong, and they'll put it back and take out the difficult one. And so it's fun that way.
It seems like a lot of that comes, and I heard you say this on another episode. You said everything is a God thing, and is that's what you teach to your kids, to not make this distinction where, oh, this is my work over here, this is my school over here, and this is my family over here. What are some other unique ways? And really, it seems unique to our kind of fragmented mindset that we have, where everything is divided, sacred, secular. But what are some ways that what you're doing is different in that regard?
Yeah, we have said from the beginning when we first got married that everything is a God issue. And when we started Goat Milk Stuff, it became everything is a God issue, including the making and selling of soap. And what we're teaching the children is that work is not a bad thing. And in our culture, so many people believe that work is punishment, work is bad, work is something to be avoided. And it's not. You hear these studies about retired people, and it's the ones who retire to something and find something to do that, stay healthy and live longer. And if they just stop and quit, they don't usually have as long of a life because, we're designed to work. And so when you can learn, in our instance, it's, we get to work with each other. We get to help people with their skin problems. We get to serve customers. Serving customers is hard. It's hard to serve customers. We have the most wonderful customers, truly wonderful. But there are some people who are really having a bad day and will take it out on us at times. And to teach the children how to handle that in a godly way is really important, because I think so many people, especially in today's culture, so many young people are taught that it's all about them. It's, everything, they should be about them feeling good and they should get ribbons for everything. And so then they get out in the real world and it's not like that. And people aren't puffing them up, and they really kind of don't know how to deal with that. And so when you have, for example, let me use the example, we do some craft shows, and we'll go to a craft show and we'll be selling soap and we'll be giving out samples. And, the children will say to a customer, would you like a free sample? And they'll say no, in like a really nasty voice, and walk away,
Right.
And the children have to learn, okay, that's fine. God didn't have that person for me to talk to. This is not about me. This is, something about that. And I usually tell them, just, pray for that person. They're either having a bad day or they're generally not a happy person, and they just need your prayer. They don't need you to get mad at them or, then treat somebody else the way you were just treated. So, everything really is a God issue if we just keep our eyes open to it.
I was curious about how many hours a week are your kids working in the business?
So there's really no good answer for that because it depends so much on what season we're in. For example, February and into March is our kidding season. And right now we've bred 85 goats. So we're expecting about 140 to 150 baby goats being born. And we do around the clock kidding shifts. So we can make sure that everybody's healthy, everybody's safe, that, they're dried off in time. So they don't get any frostbite or anything like that. So that's something that's obviously an extreme. Now, to prepare them for that, we take a vacation before we do that. So I get everybody off the farm, make sure everybody gets relaxed, everybody gets enough sleep, that kind of thing. In a normal day, it depends on which child you're talking about. The older ones obviously put in a little bit more time than the younger ones do. It depends on, like in the spring, there's a lot more goat chores than there are in the fall and in the late summer. And then it's nice because the goat chores and the business chores kind of offset each other, because as the goats are just starting to dry off and get ready for the winter, is when all our holiday internet orders really start coming in. One of the things we're struggling with right now, actually, is we started out as an internet company. I put up goatmilkstuff.com. I learned how to program a website, put all that up. And that was how we started. I did that because I with having 8 children, so, they were so young at the time, I wanted the flexibility. I didn't want to have to be, tied down to specific hours. But as we've grown and as we've gotten so much publicity, we have so many people from around the country really want to come and visit us. So our new farm we've built with it's really friendly for people to come and do tours. And that's been wonderful. The struggle with that is we have to staff those hours. So we're trying to hire some people right now to help us cover those hours, because it's a little, the family wants a little more free time. So, right now, until we hire someone, we're probably working a little more than we should be. And then once we get some help in there, that'll cut back down again. So it's really all over the board, from anywhere from, 3 to 4 hours to a kidding season, 8 to 9 to 10. to 12, depending on.
Gotcha. And are you finding that other families, especially, as they're coming and they're actually seeing what you're doing there, are you finding that other families are saying, hey, I think maybe we could do something, maybe not goat milk, but something in our family where we can help teach our kids business by working together? Are you hearing any stories like that?
Yeah, we pretty much get 3 responses. The first one is, oh my gosh, can I send my children to live with you? That's a pretty standard one. The second one is, wow, you're really living my dream. I can't, I want to do this. What I tell people with that is, when you look at us, you don't see all the years that went into this. I mean, we lived below our means for so many years because we were trying to pay off our mortgage and get out of debt completely. And when we started Goat Milk Stuff, we were then able to take a home equity line to fund the initial growth of the business. So, I tell people you can have it. It's going to take time. You have to start by putting, live below your means. You have to start saving, start teaching yourself those skills you're going to need, maybe take an accounting course or something like that. And, the third one is, just that sense of overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you even do this. My response to that is purely by God's grace. If this is something that even intrigues you a little bit, start praying about it and start praying what God would have for you. I tell people all the time, Goat Milk Stuff is God's business. I'd been making soap. I never once thought soap for a business. It was his timing, his business, and that's why it's been so successful and succeeded and been able to provide for the family, because we did what he wanted us to do. And, I fully believe that the American dream is not dead, that families can do amazing things. And you have to be within God's will, because, not that it's easy even being in God's will, because it's not. There's a lot of, there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of frustrations. There's a lot of failures that you have to learn from. But when you're in God's will and you're doing the business God wants you to, you just have that comfort that even if it's not easy, this is, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And it helps you get through to the, until that difficult part is over, and then you can start, enjoying things again.
And, our calling as believers is to go, it's not just to make a profit, but to make disciples of all nations. And I mean, what better way to do that in the business world than with your own family? And I'm sure that maybe not everybody is in a financial situation, or, maybe they feel like they lack the skills. And I mean, you can go learn skills. You can go, and maybe people would make that excuse that, you're living my dream. I could never do that because, my family, they didn't do that. They didn't show this to me. I mean, did you have that kind of background, like was anything like that modeled?
No.
From your
not at all. My whole family thought we were nuts. You're doing what? Why would you want to do that?
So there goes that excuse. Somebody might think, oh, well, maybe your dad was the biggest goat milk, dairy farmer.
No, I actually grew up
on the side of Mississippi or something.
I grew up on an island. We had sand. There were no farm animals. There was nothing. So it's all learned. I mean, the internet just makes everything so possible if you're willing to put the time in studying it, figuring it out. I mean, I never knew how to make soap. I mean, that was just a lot of research, a lot of trial and error. And it's another example of how God blessed it, because I didn't try to make a soap that was going to fix my husband's fingers or help with eczema or psoriasis. All I was trying to do was get rid of the chemicals on my children's skin. And God blessed it and helped my formula to be able to do all of those other things as well. You really can do anything. Now, it's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of prayer. But I've always thought that was just as big a lesson for the children, the prayer that goes into it when, every big decision we make, every time we struggle with something, the business, the children, the employees, they're all bathed in prayer. And then we actually have a lot of customers will put notes and, send us emails and that kind of thing. And we pray for the customers. And sometimes it's just whoever saw the note, or got the email will do it. And then other times we'll take whoever's in the soap room, if someone's suffering from cancer and it doesn't look good or whatnot, or they just lost a loved one. And we'll just all, join hands and pray for that customer and then send the order out. So it's a very practical kind of lifestyle and a very practical business for us.
Yeah. And the proverb says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And you've done that in really incalculable ways, not just financially, but the character traits, the business acumen, all of those things that are being invested into your kids as they're being discipled there in the workplace. In terms of succession planning, how long is your goal to hand that off totally to your kids in the near future?
Yeah, we've actually already started that. So my youngest is 9.5. And when she turned 8, I told the children that they had 10 years left. And so when my youngest turns 18, my husband and I are done with the business. And now when I say done, I mean, I'm done paying bills, hiring people, firing people, making a decision. I told them I'll be happy to give interviews. I'll be happy to give tours. I'll deliver baby goats for you. But all of those difficult business decisions you all are making. And so we've already met with our accountant. We've met with our lawyer, with the oldest 3 children. The other ones weren't really ready for those kind of meetings, and talking about, what that was going to look like. How were, mom and dad going to continue to are we going to continue to get paid? Are they going to buy us out? What's going to happen to the house, all the assets, that kind of thing. And we're starting to put all of those pieces into place, trying to determine who's going to be the leader when we're done, because, while it'll be, everybody will have an input, someone has to be responsible for making that final decision. And I think we've got that child picked out, one that God just really gave, that child those talents and those skills, and everybody else looks towards that child and, agrees that they really have probably what it takes, and how to keep them all so that they can run the business and still be loving siblings. And not have the business ever tear the relationships apart. Because we don't ever want that to happen. So put those things in place. What's going to happen when they all start getting married? How are spouses going to play into this? Are they going to have a role? Are they going to have voting rights? All of those sorts of things. And then my oldest daughter is funny. She just turned 20 and she's already decided that, she's going to live close by and send her children here to put them to work and so that they know what to do and all of that. So she's already, she's got them already bagging soap in her head and all sorts of stuff.
I love it. Well, goatmilkstuff.com is the website. Anything else you want to say about how people can find out more about what's going on?
Yeah. So, I actually have something for your listeners. If you're interested, I've got a free bar of soap for them if that's something they'd like to try.
Of course.
Yeah. All they need to do is go to the website. Like you said, it's goatmilkstuff.com. And then they want to go to goatmilkstuff.com/Christianity soap. And that's just one word. There's no spaces or hyphens or anything. And it'll give them the directions on what they need to do to get that free bar.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for your generosity. I'm sure one of your kids will be probably milking that one and bagging it up for whoever orders it.
Yeah. Generally, they're on there on pretty much all the orders, and they do a lot of it.
That's awesome. Well, PJ, is there a parting piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
What I have found is so many people today, Christians too, they kind of wish their lives away in that they say, okay, once this is done, then things will get better. And once this happens, then I'll be able to do what I want. And, after this, then that good thing will come. And I've really learned throughout all of this that never happens. It's always just the next thing will come and interfere. You really just need to get started. And it may be baby steps. You don't have to go from 0 to 60, really quickly. You can take baby steps and say, okay, well, this is where I want to go. What's, one thing or two things I can do this month that, maybe get me a little bit further towards that goal. Because if you're in God's will, He's going to help you get there, but you do have to do your part and you do have to start.
Wow, that is powerful. Well, PJ, thank you for this inspiring interview and for sharing your wisdom, your time, and may God continue to bless everything you put your hand to and everything you put your mind to and your family. And thank you for the example that you're setting.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for letting me share.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if so, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd leave us a quick rating and review for the Christianity in Business podcast on iTunes. You can get more information about HBU's Center for Christianity and Business at christianityandbusiness.com. Thanks for listening, and keep integrating biblical values into your business.